stop. Now you got to stop and listen to what I say. Stop and feel that you've been missing.
Welcome to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ramon. We are recording this on October 14th, 2013. And man, Ramon, remember last couple of weeks I've been talking about that energetic cloud that I felt that our solar system was passing through, and
yes.
that we were moving into the eye. I mentioned last week that I felt like we were like moving into the eye of the storm, and that we were in for a period of calm. And I noticed that energetically what I was sensing when we started moving into that eye was just at the exact same time that we had the whole government shutdown thing start here in the U.S. And I just found that synchronicity, the way I was sensing the energy, and then all of a sudden the government shut down for who knows how long. I just found that absolutely fascinating. And I feel like we're still in that eye right at the moment, but it's like I've got this feeling now about the energy that we are nearing the other edge of the eye, and we're about ready to move back into some more dynamic energy. And I think this side of this cloud, we're going to learn a lot of things about this planet and about what energetically is really truly going on here. So I'm extremely optimistic about the what's the right word? Chaos, turmoil, creating, maybe managing to bring a little order to the chaos as it comes in this time. I don't know. I just sense something dynamics getting ready to happen for us energetically. So I'm very optimistic about what we've got coming in. And I'm guessing that probably as soon as we edge out of this eye, that the government's going to go back into business.
I think you're right. Really quickly on the news section. Speaking of Eye of the Storm, this... a 16-year-old girl, you know how I'm always talking about, everybody knows I'm always talking about the younger people, and how, most people would say, these young people, blah, blah, blah. But I'm saying the opposite, because I'm just seeing, I guess is what I've opened myself up to, is just, I keep seeing these amazing things. So on Jon Stewart's show, there was this young 16-year-old girl, Malala, I can't pronounce her last name, Yousafzai. She is one of these girls in Pakistan that was speaking against the Taliban and the sexism that they have going over there, where they can't go to school and stuff like that. She started speaking against them, I think when she was 12 or 11, and she was actually shot in the head, over this. And the amazing thing is that, one, she keeps going. She left the country, obviously, and she is just an amazing story. So I would listen. I have it on Facebook, so if you guys go to the Facebook and scroll down, I'll put it up on the website by the time this airs. But it just blows my mind, because you have a 16-year-old girl, first of all, to speak against the Taliban, and then to get shot and keep going is just. And then she said, what amazed everybody was that, she was thinking if the Taliban was to attack her, what would she do? And she said, I would want education for your kids as well. Because that's her message. And I was just blown away that this old spirit, in this young body would say something like that after being shot in the head.
Yeah, I mean, there are some amazing light workers that are coming forward on the world stage now that, it's so obvious looking at it from our perspective, looking at these kids, and we can definitely see the mission that they're here to complete unfolding. They may be completely oblivious or ignorant to the fact that that's what they're doing, but you can see the divine plan working, unfolding in their lives. It's just amazing. I'm in total awe.
Yeah, and another thing for you guys who are really into like the different alien races and stuff like that. I don't know how true this is, but Tom actually found this from Ed what's his last name?
Uh, I have no idea what you're talking about right at the moment.
The book that you sent me about the aliens, the different alien races according to the Russians.
That one.
Ed
Uh,
Korek,
Kamarick.
Komaric,
Ed
yes.
Kamarick actually put a link on Facebook, and we better link that on the main page too, Ramon.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
fascinating. I mean, this guy, and he said this was a Russian book
yeah.
that was recovered after the Soviet Union crumbled and turned into their republic. He found this book. Some KGB agent or something had shared this with somebody over there, and it gets kind of fuzzy into the details on how this actually got into Ed's hands, but this book actually has a breakdown of whether they got in there 57 or 58 different races.
Yeah,
Uh,
I haven't had a chance to read it all because
yeah, I haven't either. But absolutely a fascinating one to take a look at, guys. That's one of the questions that Ramon and I often ask our guests is about how many different races that have been identified here and, some of their motivations and stuff.
I'm looking
This,
more for a good vacation spot.
right, this book is awesome. It's absolutely amazing. And somebody definitely did their homework putting it together. So,
Yeah. So we should get into it before our guest falls asleep.
absolutely.
Not at all.
Uh, we've,
Okay, good.
we've got a great treat for you guys tonight. We have Lisette Larkins with us, and Lisette has had extraordinary extraterrestrial encounters since childhood. The importance of them was to reveal to her the possibility of experiencing a chronic state of well-being, and to inspire the recognition that as spiritual beings in human bodies, we are designed to create to the same degree and with the same ability as extraterrestrials do. This means that the very purpose of our soul is to allow our imagination to run free and to be, do, and have anything and everything we want. I mean, what else could you ask for? How good can it get, right?
Yeah.
We are designed to be creative beings. When we are not in the process of creating, we are actually spiraling downward. But we cannot create what we want when we are not feeling good. Her website is lisettelarkins.com. It's LISETTELARKINS.com. And Lisette, I would love to welcome you to the 100th Monkey Radio.
How nice of you both. Thank you, Tom and Ramon. I'm so happy to be here. I'm far from asleep.
Well, that's good. That's good.
So I have to ask the first question and there's a story behind this question because Tom's daughter actually came to him a couple of years ago and said, "Dad, you're not crazy." So before we go into your background, has your family said those magic words to you yet? Any like your kids or family members?
Well, no, nobody ever actually said that. It's interesting because I think it's a topic that generates discomfort. So I'm very close with my family. I'm very close with my son. But there is a kind of a somewhat, I don't know if it's a confusion or, people they just don't really talk about it. So I have 5 siblings and a mother, and my father passed away, but nobody actually, nobody sees me and says, "Oh, how are your ETs doing? What's the latest? What are you working on?" It's not that they, I don't think they're inherently embarrassed by it, but I just think when a person's not having that kind of experience, that it's not something that they readily discussed. It's kind of like me as a child. I don't ever remember having conversations about otherworldly experiences ever.
Right.
I just don't. Do you? Growing up, do either of you remember sitting around the dinner table, with your parents and kind of talking almost philosophically,
Look,
about?
for me, luckily, my dad, it's weird too because he's very religious, but he's always talked about UFOs because his family have always had like really weird experience. I think he saw grays and my grandmother was visited by a changeling. So they've always had these weird experiences, which is funny because they're very, very religious.
That is amazing.
Yeah, so on that sense, that side of the family was very open. My mother's side of the family, where they're more open to religious beliefs and stuff like that, they're not so open to it, which is
Hmm.
again strange.
Right,
So,
right. Well, even if people, my siblings or my friends in social circles, and I'm not talking about my so-called mastermind group. That's a different story. But take my just general social circles, people who know I'm an author, but we don't really talk about it. What people do say to me is, "Oh, I heard about this person who had this amazing paranormal experience." So they are fond of telling me about something weird that they heard in the news, or
Right.
but and so that's their way of trying to connect with me. And I guess, gosh, in my old age, I've really kind of come full circle in my understanding how we're all just a different kind of, we just have different focuses at different times in our own growth. And because it's my focus, it may not be somebody else's focus. And then, of course, there's the whole other spectrum where it's not only is it not somebody's focus, but they actually loathe, loathe to hear about it discussed, which is one of my
hmm
great fascinations in getting hate mail. I don't know if you two get hate mail, but it's a fascination of mine because for somebody to actually take the time, to go online and to send you an email and to say, something like, "I saw your photograph and you're ugly," or your brain
Right.
it's such a fascination because it just speaks to something is being stirred within them. And of course it's usually motivated by fear, right?
Right. Right. Motivated by
But
fear and by control of other elements that are working through these people.
exactly, control groups who use unsuspecting souls.
Right.
Exactly.
Right.
Which brings us to a great topic, which is this whole idea that all of the control programs on the planet, as far as really what we each have to overcome when we get on the path of our own destiny, it's really, really extraordinary what we have to overcome. And it's one of the reasons why I love to talk about forming groups of people who are like-minded and who stick together, because wow, there is something else to overcome to really get to the point where we embrace the deliberate creators that we are.
Right.
You know what's funny? Recently, I think a week or 2 weeks ago, I didn't tell you this time, but another friend of mine's, he moved to Mexico and he started learning Spanish down there. And he was like, I see UFOs all the time down here. And this is a guy who thought it was all BS. Um, when I used to talk to him about it when we lived in New York, um, he thought it was all BS, and now it's just for him it's a common thing because down there in the Mexican culture they don't really look at it as a big deal
Yes,
as the American culture does.
right, and partially because as the so-called one of the most so-called powerful countries on earth, so-called, is that of course there's just a greater degree of suppression in many cases, right? So we've got so many different mechanisms in order to suppress through pharmaceuticals and through toxins in the food and through not feeling well and on and on and on. because as long as we're not feeling that great, it's kind of hard to get in touch with the goals of the soul.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and there's definitely orchestrated efforts to keep us from, being in a state to where we're able to begin to open those things within ourselves that give us that connection to higher planes, to higher self, to angels, to extraterrestrial, to whatever you want to term that. Definitely. Definitely, that's something that I noticed when I started to my path started to unfold more fully, was that when I did have these conversations with people, I seemed to intuitively know how far I could go with the subject with them. Now, have you found that yourself, where when you meet somebody, you get a distinct feeling of what kind of subjects are off the table, so to say?
Yes, I agree, and I tend to be very respectful of that, because it seems like every year I progress in my own growth. I hope and I think that I am becoming more and more compassionate of where other people are in their own understanding, because we really can't put judgment on the slow learner soul, so to speak, right? I mean, we all have our own pace, and we don't jeer at the physically handicapped. But I think those of us on the spiritual path do find it challenging to cohabitate and to kind of work with those who are not necessarily on the fast track of their own spiritual growth.
Right.
And it's of course the great learning opportunity to be able to live with a spouse who is a unwitting dream stealer, if you will. That is a great opportunity, great schooling opportunity when we're married to a dream stealer, or we're a parent of one or a child of one or whatever. But and shall we just for a moment define dream stealer? And what I mean by that is somebody who doesn't seem to applaud us when we discover what it is that we came here to do. Right. And certainly many people on the spiritual path have sometimes more unusual ideas, and they tend to spend their time doing somewhat different activities than the general culture. And so sometimes we push up against those that we love who are living with us or who are close to us when they may be more of a slow learner soul, so to speak.
It gets a little bit frustrating on our end of it sometimes, especially if that person that we're dealing with is somebody who has a place in our heart,
Yeah, and have you noticed? And I love this dynamic where it's like if you take any kind of talent in the world, let's say somebody who's a mathematician, and then they're speaking to a first grader about mathematical equations, something really advanced principles. Well, in this, in our culture, the person who doesn't get it would say, "Wow, I wish I understood that, and that's fascinating, but either you're way ahead of me or I'm not there yet." But interestingly enough, in the whole path of spiritual evolution, we have the opposite situation where those who have through great hard work, by the way, it doesn't come accidentally, through great hard work have been able to access other dimensional experiences, or on and on and on, what have you. When it's discussed, of course, those who don't have those awarenesses and abilities, of course, sneer at it. So it's that great, paradox where those who are, in some cases, more capable in some areas are more criticized and more sneered at within the cultural context, which is, of course, the whole point, because those people, especially those of us who chose, I myself, I came into a family who, we didn't talk about alien encounters and all that, and my parents, raised me Catholic. They were not extremely religious, but they were somewhat religious. But, and I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, but one of the things that immediately happened to me when I started having my contact experiences was I was able to overnight see behind the veil in all different areas. And it was totally crazy-making for me, which is one of the reasons why I ended up in a psychiatric hospital for 3 weeks, but that's another story. Right. And we can talk about that too. But just by virtue of overnight seeing extraterrestrials, perceiving of many of the other lives that I'd had, and recognizing the cast of characters that were in those lives, many of whom persecuted and murdered me, they're now, beloved family members in this life. My head was spinning. So, how does that work when your arch enemy is now, your spouse or your
right.
parent,
right.
and you're, but that's really what's going on for each of us. So, wow, for me that was quite a challenge.
Yeah, what the one aspect of that I found the most disturbing for myself was when I was able to start discerning where the violence came from. When I say violence, I'm talking about the harsh speaking, the harsh emotions, all that is directed at you from those people when you're trying to talk to them. And when I was able to start discerning and understanding a little bit more about, and even sensing more the source of those emotions and those feelings and that attitude, and realizing that it wasn't really them, that really started. That one was a hard one for me to actually swallow. But on the other side of that, it actually gave me so much more compassion and understanding and patience with those same people.
Right, those intense negative emotions. Right?
Yeah.
Challenging to be around.
I was gonna say, before we get too ahead of ourselves, we should probably give the audience a background of how this all started for you.
Absolutely.
Okay, sure. I was a regular person. I mean, I was not raised, knowing about these experiences. Although at 7, I did have my first encounter experience, but I couldn't remember all of it. So I became fascinated with kind of what was in the sky, but it also resulted in a kind of a significant sense of loss of self-confidence for me as a 7-year-old. So I became extremely shy and very, very quiet. But, then nothing else happened. And so then fast forward to when I was about, I guess I was 30. I was now married, and I had just given birth to a young boy. And the nature of my life at that point was I was devastated. I was just devastated because I was somewhat of a newlywed, just given birth. These are the things that we little girls aspire to, and here I had what seemed to be everything that I was supposed to want, and my husband and I were miserable with each other. We were just not a good fit. We, as many young couples do, we had financial struggles, and I was just devastated. I was even probably starting to get depressed, and so I was just in a place where, I didn't consider myself a religious person, but I started to pray. I started to just in deep grief, saying, "Please, show me the way. How do I get out of this mess? Why is my marriage so horrible? What have I done to deserve this kind of misery?" And it was just about noticing that my dreams didn't seem like they were coming true. So I started to, my then husband, he traveled a lot, and one night he went out of town, and I just put my son to sleep, and I got into bed, and soon right after that, all of this kind of paranormal phenomena just burst into the room. So everything that you can imagine, from bright lights, very, very loud electrical sensation, like a zapping, and then almost like a wind tunnel, and I noticed that my hair was blowing around my face. But then I looked across the room, and the draperies were completely still. So how did that happen? How does that work? And so at this very first time, as an adult, when this was happening, I started to kind of fall back onto the pillows, terrified, and I started to scream, but nothing came out of my mouth. And I just was desperate in my mind for the safety of my child, who was down the hall in his crib, and but I couldn't move. So that was kind of one of the first experiences, and I then, soon after, seemingly fell asleep. And that started to happen over and over and over and over and over, and I would somehow, quote-unquote, come to, or meaning wake up, but it would always happen with a jolt, as though I was kind of bounced on my bed, and then I would crawl and get into the closet, my clothes closet, and just sit in there and cry, and sit in there, how the long dresses and the long coats kind of go all the way to the floor. I would get in there, huddle up, and just cry. I was just devastated. I didn't know what was happening, and this went on for a long time. And everything started happening. All this kind of weird stuff started happening, meaning electromagnetically, the whole place just imploded. Meaning, if I walked by, the phones would ring on and off the answering machine. In those days, they were regular old answering machines. The answering machine would replay, the toaster would pop up and down, lights would go on and off, and had I been more both psychologically and spiritually mature, I would have found it fascinating and funny, right? But I wasn't, and so I was just alarmed. My then husband started noticing it, and I hadn't yet really confided in him what was happening because I was afraid. And so I started buying books. And he would find these books lying around, on the occult or on Ghostbusters or on, what do you do if your house is haunted? I had no idea.
Right.
And so I started kind of going to people, like I went to this one woman who said she was an expert on ghosts, and I went to her. She said, "Oh yeah, oh my gosh," she says, I can see your house is haunted. And she gave me salt, and she says, take a salt bath and light these white novena candles, and you can protect yourself, but be careful. And I mean, it was just nuts. So my husband would come home and see me, with salt and candles and Bibles, and he thought I was really losing it. And that was when, we kind of sat down and we said, look, and I didn't tell him everything, but I did tell him some of the things, and that was quite enough. So he and I, he said, look, why don't we go and get you, get you checked out? So late one night, we, packed up an overnight bag, and he drove me to a psychiatric hospital, and I checked myself in, and I was there for 3 weeks. And of course, while I was there, he was frightened, and so while I was there, he filed for divorce, and I lost custody of my son and closed a checking account, and all that kind of dramatic stuff that happens that you have to go through when you're learning how to find your own empowerment, and you don't have any. So I had to rebuild my life from that point on.
So the process, I know you recounted this on Coast to Coast here a couple of weeks ago, but the process of you getting out of there, I found to be quite an amazing story. Was that one of the first times that you really noticed and were able to acknowledge that that there was a method to the madness behind everything?
I think so, and one of the things I forgot to even say on that interview is one day towards the end of my stay there, when then I went through the process of attempting to get out of there, which story you may want me to repeat or not, depending on what you want. But I was eating. I was dressed in a hospital. They give you hospital clothes. You're not wearing your street clothes in a psychiatric hospital.
Right.
And I was mixed in with all different kinds of people. Some were psychotic. Lots of people were seeing aliens in the middle of the night, and I thought, oh my God, am I one of them? And they were nuts, right? It was terrifying to think that I was like they were. So we were monitored. You couldn't take a shower with your own deodorant. You couldn't use shampoo. Everything was supervised because people tried to kill themselves with shampoo and razor blades and deodorant. So when it was mealtime, we were all kind of herded into a cafeteria, and they kind of kept an eye on that we were indeed eating properly. So I would fill up my plate with food and go sit down. I was so depressed, there was no way I was eating anything. And while I was at the salad bar, this is in the psychiatric hospital cafeteria, while I was at the salad bar, a psychiatrist came up to me. He had the white coat on and everything. And I was the only one at the salad bar at that moment. And he said to me very quietly, "I could get fired or worse for what I'm about to tell you." And I kind of just like dropped the tongs, like, what? Now what? Because keep in mind, when I went in there, all my experiences stopped the night I went in there. So I thought, I didn't even know, what does that mean? Does it mean I am crazy or I'm not crazy? I couldn't figure it out. And I said, what? And he says, "You cannot talk." And he was whispering. He said, "I only have 20 seconds to tell you this. Listen carefully." And I'm like, what is he going to tell me? What else could possibly happen? Keep in mind, I was completely devastated because now I had, my husband had left me. I had lost custody, and I'm in a nut house with no money to hire an attorney, right? So he said, "I've read your file. You're not crazy. You must be experiencing something like paranormal phenomena. You need to get out of this hospital. I don't know how you're going to do it, but you need to get yourself out of here. You'll never regain custody. If you go to your child custody hearing," how do you call it? There's an acronym that means AMA, Against Medical Advice. So in other words, you couldn't just break out the door and start running down the street because I had a child custody hearing coming up, right?
Right.
So he told me all this in like 20 seconds and then walked away. I was just standing there with my cafeteria tray, like, what? And at that moment, it was really the first moment where somebody in authority, this was a psychiatrist, somebody in authority had said, "You're okay. So you got to stand up for yourself. You got to look after yourself because no one else will." And here's a really interesting thing, little sidebar. I went to try to find him years later, and there was no such person.
Right. That was my next question.
Wow.
My next question was whether or not you ever saw him there before or after. Yeah. Yes.
So, So, and then do you want me to?
Yeah, if you would share that story too, please, for our listeners.
Yeah, so I went to in that was in what? When was that? I can't remember. 1989 or 1990. And this was not a county facility. This was a 5-star psychiatric hospital where people with really good insurance were sent. So these were this was an upper middle class establishment, and if you had good insurance benefits, which I did, they're not just letting you out of there, right? So one of the keys was to find out how to, I didn't know how you get out of a nut house once you get yourself in there. I didn't have any book or access to Google or anything. So I went to my clinician, and you'd have meetings every other day with your team, and you had a head psychiatrist, and sometimes you met with a couple of them, and you would check in, like, how you doing, are you still seeing, little gray men in the night, or are things going bump in the night, and they take a little note. So in one of these meetings soon after that, I said, I think I'm ready, I'd like to check out. And they had not yet prescribed me any medication or anything, although they were probably getting ready to do it, but they hadn't yet. And he said, well, because of course they know everything that's going on in your personal life, especially when you're served. I was served by a process server while I was a patient there. So they knew that my husband had filed for divorce while I was there. So, I said, I can't go to a child custody hearing as a patient here. And, my lead's shrink said, well, we can't just sign you out. We have responsibilities, supposing you hurt yourself or somebody else, and, we can't just let you go. And I said, well, why not? Just sign here on the page. And he said, no, we can't do that. We got to evaluate you and make sure you're okay. And so then what happened was that night while I was sleeping, one of the male orderlies came in my room, sat down on my bed, and started to grope me. And this is one of those perfect examples of, you never know how your guardian angels are going to help you. Because at first blush, that would seem to be one more victimization, right? But as this orderly started to grope me, and I was so defeated, I don't even think I tried to stop him. I mean, he kind of just started to kiss my face, and I was just completely defeated. And the next morning, I immediately made an appointment to see my head psychiatrist. And I said, I think I'm ready to leave now. Here's the paper. Please sign me out. He said, we already had this conversation. I don't think we can do that. And I said, well, in fact, last night one of your orderlies molested me. And he said, do you realize, how serious of a charge that is? And you really shouldn't be making this stuff up. And I gave him the guy's name. And I said, you know what? I feel pretty certain that this person has done this to other patients. And if you don't sign me out, I will go to the Los Angeles Times, and you people will be, God knows what's going to happen to you. And he signed me out, which was an extraordinary. Yeah, it was one of the first times that I had really stood up for myself. And it kind of started with that psychiatrist saying, you're not crazy, you're going to be okay. And it's like somebody in authority gave me permission to just get a little self-confidence and to stand up for myself. And that started my journey. As soon as I got out of there, it started me on my road.
Interesting.
It seems like when you started praying and asking, it's, that famous saying, be careful what you ask for.
Mm-hmm, right.
It's what me and Tom like to call the proverbial 2x4 up against the head. Looking at it back now, would you change anything?
Oh, no. In fact, now, I can only tell you what my understanding is, because once the veil was broken, through the years, I've had spontaneous, how do you say it? I've become spontaneously aware of the soul contracts that I made. So what I found out was, as horrifying as it may seem, we are actually in the discarnate state before we come into the body. And with our wise group of elders, we're choosing who, we're going to be born to, what parents we're going to choose, and what our kind of heredity disposition will be, so we know if we're going to come into an alcoholic father, and that we indeed have a predisposition to also be alcoholic, but it's a challenge that we're going to attempt to deal with, and what souls are, what cast of characters we're going to be married to, and who our siblings are going to be. Now, it's not that we have total predestiny. It's that the cast of characters are set. Now, of course, at any time we have free will, and we can go left, and then, the plan B kind of steps into place. So it's kind of like predestiny merging with free will. It's kind of a fascinating blending of the two. So in answer to your question, now that I understand what I understand, there is no, we make those decisions with our elder group with perfect wisdom, with perfect understanding of what we are bringing and calling to ourselves for this lifetime to come that will best serve the goals of the soul. And naturally, there are inherent challenges in those choices. If there weren't challenges, we wouldn't be incarnating, although I say that with one exception. There are some souls who, because of the previous lives, meaning one or two or more lives, which were particularly arduous. Let's say somebody chose to come in as a handicap, with a physical handicap, or even, let's say somebody chose to come in as a gay person with HIV. So not only are they shunned by, the community at large, but they're also physically sick. That would be a very advanced soul choice to come in with that kind of known discomfort into that kind of incarnation. Is tremendously courageous. So let's say somebody has one of those incarnations and it was just really exhausting, but it was filled with extreme prejudice. Let's say, it was a life in the South in the 60s where there was violence. So the next life, one can choose to have a bye, so to speak. Like in tennis tournaments, you can with your elders, you can choose to say, I'm going to rest this life and just reconnect with my main primary soulmate. And because we all have a primary soulmate and secondary soulmates. And my primary soulmate and I, we're all agreeing that we're just going to have a kind of a not too dramatic lifetime. And we all know people who are in those lifetimes,
Right.
Where they don't have tremendous obstacles of addiction or physical handicap or disease or poverty or, oppression. Those are buys, but, and they're well-deserved. On the other hand, some people actually set themselves up to be challenged, and then as they go, they say, I'm not going to do that. So let me give you an example. Let's say I decide to be married to, we'll just use my first husband as an example, and I'm not picking on him because he was just perfect, and I was perfect, and we were all doing the best that we could. Now, I wouldn't have told you that as a 20-year-old, or how old was I, a 26-year-old, but now, with hindsight, I understand. With wisdom, I understand. So let's just say here I am as a discarnate making plans with my elder group to come in, and now I am saying, okay, you're going to be my husband, Joe, and I'll be your wife. We'll be 26. We're going to be young and stupid and broke, and we're going to be arguing like cats and dogs. And it's even possible that he's my primary soulmate, which is really extraordinary. Do you know how many primary soulmates have actually divorced each other?
Yeah.
Because we assume that our primary soulmates just really get us, right? And they often do. They often do with perseverance. So in my case, as a young 20-year-old, who knows? He may have been my primary soulmate, but as 20-year-olds, we couldn't overcome our own egos. We were making each other wrong between now and next week. So here we come into this life, and now we're married, and let's just say that we had made a contract to be married and stay with each other throughout our lives to work on our difficulties, because we each are coming in with different challenges, right? So let's say I have a real issue with controlling slightly abusive men or bullies, right? Let's say that's my issue because I have been, in many, many lifetimes, a weakling. I've not been able to stand up for myself. So I come back in, purposely join with someone who will bully me so that I can, allow the goals of my soul to raise up to my own level of awareness, and also to allow, the beauty of my soul to shine through the ideas of my human brain. Now, of course, it's true that sometimes, because the brain and the soul agenda is different, it's true that sometimes we get carried away with our roles. So let's just say my then husband agreed in a discarnate, okay, listen, I'll be your husband. I'm going to be kind of a little bit of a bully, but you're going to stay with me and work with me through compassion and kindness. You'll be my example, and you're going to teach me because that's your karmic debt to me, because I helped you in this other lifetime, so you're going to help me with that. So now here we are as 20-year-olds, and I'm not having any of it. It's like, no, you're a jerk, you're unkind, I'm out of here. So let's just say, and let's just say he also kind of gets carried away with his bulliness, because the human brain that he chose, because we're always dealing with the soul merging with the human brain. The human brain that he chose has a kind of a predilection for power, and has kind of, it kind of likes it. So he's off to the races. So our goals, our challenges become redoubled based on how the human brain interacts with our soul agenda. Isn't it fun?
Wow. I never thought about it that way. Because, you always hear about the soulmate or, what's the other word, Tom?
Twin flame.
Twin flames, and how they always make it sound as just like, okay, it's just gonna fall into place perfectly. And of course, there is that attraction, but that doesn't
Yes.
mean that it works out. And I've always felt that way, but um,
Yes.
people
And
always, yeah, go ahead.
well, yeah. And in those many of those cases, let's just say we're in a life that's a bi. You know, we're using that word again. What's a better word? You know, like a skate life, an easy
An
life,
R&R
right?
life.
An R&R life, exactly. Let's say we have an R&R life. Well, because we know in advance some of the challenges of the particular human body that we're going to come into, right? Because we're with our elder group. They're, of course, all wise, and they know the genetic pool choices that we get to choose from. So if we already know kind of the genetic makeup of the mother and father that we're coming into, we have an idea of what our genetic, lineage is going to be like and what the predisposition to certain behaviors will be like. So by the same result, if we're choosing an R&R, we may come into a very kind of even-tempered couple so that we can have an even-tempered upbringing, right?
Right.
So that we can have just a traditional kind of marriage, and there are no major intense lessons that we're here to accomplish because we've chosen an R&R. But it's interesting because I have some dear friends who have a belief system that, in fact, an indication of no problems is an indication of an evolved soul, but it's quite the contrary. Of course, the advanced soul has lots and tons of interesting challenges, and then with grace and dignity rises to the occasion and learns to overcome them. So we can also still have a lot of intense obstacles to overcome and growth opportunities in a regular life without necessarily being born to, say, a family in Iraq or, a really difficult life in sub-Sahara, Africa.
Right.
We can still be born into a third world, or rather a first world country, into a regular city with middle-class parents and still set ourselves up for intense challenges. And I'm sure we could just go down a list of 20 or 30 of those types of challenges.
Easily. Easily.
Yeah. At the same time, at what point, because I've seen people who are addicted to problems, meaning that it's like they get over one problem and then they create like 10 more, and you see
Right.
them creating it. So at that point, I don't feel like that they're getting the lesson because they're creating, it's like, stop
Exactly.
doing that.
Right.
It's like
Yeah,
you want to
right.
slap their hands.
Right, and they're in that cycle, that law of attraction cycle where you put out your energetic fingerprint or your blueprint, and you're kind of sending out this beacon of who you are energetically, and you keep calling in the same, right?
Right.
So it does take practice and discipline and also information or knowledge to learn how to kind of step outside of that vicious cycle of it. In other words, it's terrible, it's horrible, it's hurtful, I'm a victim. How do you evolve beyond that so you start attracting better and better experiences and higher and higher vibrationing people? And it does take conscious effort. It does, and we don't usually get to leap 10 levels of emotion at once.
Right.
We kind of have to work up through. We don't get to go from suicidal depression to joy. Well, unless of course you're bipolar, but that's a different story. We have to work through those lower bands of negative human emotion. Depression, sadness, grief, and then we move up, and now we're into. Well, at least we're into boredom now. That's higher than fury, right? And then we just kind of move up this emotional scale, and we start attracting more and more of that which we are, that we say that it's what we want, because we keep getting stuff that we say that we don't want, but we don't recognize our own causality in that.
Right. It's at where we place our focus. If we, and it's a vicious cycle when you get into that, especially the poor me attitude. The victim mentality. That one is, I've seen many people that who are embody that victim mentality, and they just continue. This is goes right to what Ramon was talking about. These people that are in that vicious cycle. The poor me thing. They keep feeling sorry for themselves, and then they keep creating situations to feel sorry for themselves. Then, so
right.
It's like,
Sometimes it takes a few lifetimes of those. And was I a perfect example of that in my 20s?
yeah.
I really didn't see how I was the creator of that experience, or at least how I had some responsibility in it. We're still kind of, even in this culture, we are struck by the poor, innocent, the child who's a victim of terrible atrocities. Well, how can that make any sense, right? And so we do tend to, it's no big surprise, but our media focuses on that by design, so that we continue to believe that we're all inherently unsafe, and it's all happening to us instead of having some degree of responsibility in it. But it does. I have to say, I was in that cycle myself, and when I got sick of being sick of it, I started to change.
Right, and you mentioned earlier that you'd actually got down and actually prayed and asked for some help, and that's that I've witnessed it, I've experienced it myself, and I've witnessed it in others that when they finally they'll get to a point, it's almost like this is something with what I've learned since I've had the experience myself, and my understandings of how this stuff works. It's like we set up these events in our lives that will take us to that point, that will take us to the point where we actually, in earnest and from the core of our being, will pose those questions to universe, to God, to that higher force. And that is actually a huge activation in our lives that really gets the ball rolling for our unfoldment, for our spiritual unfoldment.
Tom, you know what it reminds me of? Sorry, it reminds me of the when you take a branch, you pull it back and then you tie a rope to it, and then so it's like we make these what do you call that?
A boomerang ricochet. That?
Yeah, I forgot what you call it, but anyway, like it's like through our life we make that. It's like, okay, if you go left at this point in your life, it's gonna hit you.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I know, it's so painful when we're stuck in that feeling of it's not my fault. He's doing it to me, right? And then we kind of get to a point, when we really become humbled. For me, when I was praying, it was really one of the first times that I was willing to say, okay, I have no clue how to do it.
Right.
No clue. So I'm listening now. Now I'm listening. Show me the way. Show me the way. And perhaps I quieted my mind wherein previously I had not. So I was able to actually hear and receive a little bit of guidance. But it got a lot worse before it got better. But of course, the getting worse enabled me to really start getting in the direction of what I really, really would really become, my life's work.
Right. Well, they say that the medicine normally tastes pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yes. It's funny. One of those. In fact, that experience that I went through, so long ago, as a 20-year-old, is one of the reasons why today, if there's somebody who really rubs me wrong, and I feel that, they have their hook in me, so to speak, like somebody that just bothers me, if I detect that they have their hook in me, emotionally speaking, I really have to take a look at that, because I know that hook means, guess what, folks? The next life, I'm coming back with them, and they're going to be my spouse or my parent. So, really, so okay, I'm going to look at this. Where's my responsibility? How can I exhibit more compassion? How can I really get in touch with what that person is there to teach me, because I would rather not come back as that person's spouse next time.
Right. You know, and that's something, just exactly what you just said there is working out, looking at the situation, kind of that third person objective perspective, and really analyzing what am I doing here? What's the whole situation? Why am I feeling like this? What is the cause of this uneasy feeling? You know, why am I having this negative attitude towards this situation? You know, when you really start picking apart these situations in our lives, the cure is almost always laid within that observation. When you're able to look at it, you can almost always see the right move. You know,
yeah. You know, I wrote this one book called "Difficult People: A Gateway to Enlightenment," and in a nutshell, it's about using difficult people, and I mean very difficult people, and difficult situations as a spiritual practice. And it was extraordinary to me. At the time, I was caring for a woman in mid to late stage Alzheimer's, and there was a time when she hated me, and she was difficult and angry, and when I would attempt to feed her with a feeding tube because she could no longer eat, she would try to break my finger. I mean, she was the quintessential example of a difficult person. And one of the things that I learned in that experience over several years is that we, you know, those of us on the spiritual path, we sometimes get confused about the difference between not having judgment on somebody, right? Somebody who's difficult to be around, and having to adopt a Pollyanna attitude and pretend that we have no choice, right? So it's a great distinction to be able to behold what we consider to be wrongdoing, and there's wrongdoing everywhere around us. To be able to behold wrongdoing and to be able to calmly and assertively then choose from that. So the perfect example is somebody who's married to an alcoholic. So what most of us do is we're married to an alcoholic and we're angry that we've either wasted our time or that we've changed our life to commit to the person, and now they're doing something that we don't like. They're drinking too much, let's say. So we continue to threaten, and we continue to say, if you keep doing that, and look what you've done to me, and blah, blah, blah. So we keep going on with an upset reaction rather than just saying, okay, you know, this person is drinking. So, you know, the ideal result to come from that through our own growth is to be able to get to the point where we're no longer making threats. We just come into terms with what we want in our clarity, and to be able to say, if and when you drink again, I'm going to leave. And then leave without drama, without feeling sorry, without feeling angry that the person wasted our time, without all of the stuff that goes with it, right? So all of us, each and every one of us, are constantly coming up against something that we don't really want, or we don't feel that that's right for us. It doesn't mean that we have to, you know, pretend that it's not happening, but it's incumbent upon us to kind of find our own goddess and God power within, and to be able to make a calm, you know, especially this goes with the people that we're living with, right? Who among us doesn't have these dynamics in our homes with people we're living with, our children or our parents, or, you know, Thanksgiving with our holiday people and all the drama that goes on with the holidays,
right.
You know. But to be able to, with clarity and patience and dignity, say, I'm now going to do this. I see that you're doing that. I'm now going to do this, and then to do it. The challenge is that we don't do it because we're afraid of something, you know, and to identify what we're afraid of. We're afraid of the loss of something. We're afraid of the loss of our financial stability. We're afraid of the loss of our, you know, somebody. If we walk away from somebody, we're going to be lonely. So we're not able to look at what we're afraid of losing if we live by our own values and ideals. And the thing that I learned is that ET, extraterrestrial guides, and also any kind of incarnate or discarnate soul group guides are always looking to see if we, as a, you know, incarnated soul, if the character of our soul is maintaining its integrity. in terms of values, ideals, and action.
Hmm.
During
That's a big-
incarnation. During incarnation. Right. So the question is, are we becoming submerged by our host body and the host brain? Or did we as a soul shine through? So, these are the great challenges that every one of us deals with when we're trying to find the strength to live to our values, our ideals, and our action. But then the anger is misplaced when, really the frustration is really should be directed at oneself when we're afraid to live up to those, because it takes great courage to do so. But that's why we've come here, is to do that dance. And then we have a whole team of our guides kind of watching us. Because as soon as we drop the body, right, and we pass to this other, whatever you want to call it, the in-between or whatever, that's exactly what they're going to look at. And we're going to be there right with them looking. Did, our immortal soul maintain its integrity in terms of values, ideals, and action? And if not, we're going to have one of those, oh God, I did it again, and then our challenge is redoubled. Yippee, and then we get to come back again with the same person and do it again. So we might as well just do it now. So the good news is that for every single one of us who recognizes where we've messed it up, we still have years of our life left right now in this incarnation to go in and, and take a good look and figure it out. And, how does it work with the Alcoholics Anonymous 12 steps where you when it's appropriate, you look at what you've done wrong and make amends or something like that. But this idea that if this person still has their hook in me, if I'm still angry, if they're still my enemy, clean it up, because you're coming back, baby. You're coming back with them. So clean it up, baby, so you don't have to do it again.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hello?
No, we're here.
Yeah. Oh,
I was just before we finish up this hour, I was thinking that you're speaking on a one-to-one human level, but at the same time, I think that also expands into because there's a lot of cases of people being abused by the negative extraterrestrials, which is not the whole race. Which I keep always saying that people, it's like saying, well, there are some humans that are creating nuclear bombs and causing wars, but that's like 1%. So I look at it kind of the same way with the extraterrestrials. But my point is that this one person who's being abducted and maybe abused, and they're doing these crazy experiments on them.
Yeah.
That if they have the same poor me mentality, probably even stronger so, because in an abusive relationship between two humans, it's easy to say, so-and-so is being beaten by their husband. But when you're being abused by an extraterrestrial, there's nobody to talk to, so it's even a stronger poor me.
Can we talk about that? I don't mean to laugh. But
no, definitely. That's why I brought it up.
The way you said it was so funny. Can we talk about that? And because it's such a great question, because that's what everybody wants to know. Wait a minute, let's say, we know, you can't fool us. We know there's lots of books and movies out there about people who've been abducted by the mean old aliens. What about them? And, it's impossible to have this conversation, without having it in the greater context that we've already been having it. So let's just back up just for a tiny little quick second. So here we are, with our elder group. There's great wisdom, and we're now choosing the life for our next incarnation. And since scientists have determined that there's 100 billion galaxies, 100 billion galaxies, that's not 100 billion planets. We're talking about galaxies, right? So that's an untold amount of planets with potential life in just one galaxy. So there are so many places that that between our elders and our own ideas of what we're attempting to do and accomplish, we can incarnate in various and sundry places, both in a physical dimension and other dimensions. Some of them require bodies and some of them don't. They're all viable incarnations. So some of us choose Earth. Yippee, here we come to Earth, where there's tremendous fear here. It's a world of conflict. There's tremendous diversity in soul growth. Overpopulation has outpaced our kind of mental and spiritual development. This is, as I always say, Earth is one of the most difficult, if not the most difficult, learning environments for incarnating souls. But nonetheless, we get to choose. So here we are choosing. Some people choose, this planet. Other people choose this experience. And there are all these cast of characters. So there's no difference between choosing to come into two very difficult parents with heroin addictions or alcohol addictions, or we're born into, sub-Saharan Africa, or we're in the inner cities of Chicago. There's no difference between that and choosing the cast of characters who are in a different physical incarnation. Now, I know it's hard to believe that we're not just helpless and hapless victims in all this, but there are some predetermined choices about what we want to overcome. I agree that would be a particularly difficult incarnation if you're having a so-called, and I'm quoting that, right, a so-called victimization experience as an otherworldly experience, because you talk about feeling isolated, right? But remember, we already said that you can often tell some of the most arduous and aggressive decisions for soul growth are in certain incarnations, such as the gay person who has HIV, right? There's tremendous the whole population is critical, and there's this tremendous sense of not fitting in. So these are very advanced, usually and often very advanced souls who want the fast track. Well, there's another one. Somebody who is having an experience. It's a difficult experience. It's almost a parent victimization experience. It's with another worldly being from some other dimension, and you can't even talk about it with anybody. Yet, it's happening. So, there's two sides to look. There's so many things to discuss about it. For starters, we've already talked about that the law of attraction is actually in effect, and we're calling experiences to us, even if we have a kind of predetermined that we're going to come into contact with this cast of characters. There is a way that we can keep those hooks in us for a long time. We already know that through negative human emotion: anger, hate, resentment, get away from me, I hate you, you're doing it all to me. Now, does that sound familiar when you're talking about somebody who's describing a victimizing alien abduction, right? It fits the parameters. So, we have to, we don't necessarily apply spiritual principles to the UFO abduction model. That's the whole point, is that people who are stuck in the abduction model, they are not getting the other side of the story from UFO investigators who, although they're very well-meaning, they may be completely misinformed. They're not understanding the greater picture. So, yes, it's one of the more challenging incarnations, I would agree. But, I came into a body of a young girl. I had sexual molestation, and I got to overcome that. I got to move through that. I got to learn about the compassion, about compassion for somebody who is in so much psychic pain that then they're so confused that they're having those same kind of experiences and pain from their standpoint. So it is so hard to believe that there's this greater plan, and that we have some sense of responsibility in what the great and kind of overarching experiences are that we're experiencing. But the more mature soul is starting to look to see, what hand am I playing in this? And if it really is one of those choices that I'm going to set this up. I'm purposely going to come into extremely addictive parents. I'm purposely going to, be born to Hitler or something really extreme. I'm purposely going to be born into just this horrendous family. There's just no accidents in something like that. And so if we look deeply, it's the most difficult thing to talk about, but if we look very, very deeply, we're often, we're learning from the great victimization incidents that we ourselves perpetuated on others.
Right.
And we have chosen to kind of be in the experience of seeing how that feels. It's not a very popular discussion, but it's, in the give and the take of it, like we all suspect, we've all been the murderers, and we've all hurt each other, and we're all hurting each other. So somehow, we continue on and have compassion for each other.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think on some level and this is how I came to term with the whole victim thing for myself was I realized that on some level I agreed to everything that's happened to me, that I perceived as coming from an external source. I agreed to it somehow or another. And looking back, that hindsight's always 20/20. And as I grew in wisdom and understanding and knowledge, I actually saw what I gained out of those experiences. So, when we do look back on those traumatic times, we can definitely see that they had a part to play in our learning experience. So.
Right. I mean, the great question is, without that person, what would I have not learned?
Right.
Without that person in my life, and there's the little pointer, ding, 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 ding.
Yeah. So, okay. Well, Lisette, we ran over a bit here in the first hour, but that's just awesome stuff. Would you share for our listeners where they can? You've got 4 books out now, or 5?
Yes,
4 books.
4 books. People
only
can
4 books. Just kidding.
4 books. People can email me. Go to my website, lisettelarkins.com. There's a way to email me there. I am part of a larger mastermind group, and we believe that one of the greatest kind of mechanisms for getting in touch with the goals of our soul are for like-minded souls to stick together and together create just an amazing, abundant life full of creation opportunities. So if it rings true for you, email me, and I'd be happy to stay in touch.
Fantastic. All right, guys. Well, we're going to take a short break here, and we will be coming back in the members section. And we're gonna dig deeper into Lisette and her experiences and the wisdom that she's gleaned through them. And wow, I love these kind of conversations. And there's some really good stuff here, guys. So I urge you to, if you're not a member yet, we are more than happy to welcome you with open arms into the 100th Monkey Crowd. And all you have to do is hit that become a member button and become another monkey. All right. Well, we'll jump off into the second segment. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
The love you deny is the pain you carry.
We'll be back.
Stop and feel that you've been missed on along the way. Put aside your petty fight, serve your dignity. You've got to show the heart that you've been hiding and set it free. There's just one door, the world gone wrong. We all need love, and if the cure for one is the cure for us all, there's an urgent message trying to reach you. Excuse yourself and pick up the call. Pick up the call. You gotta pick up the call. It came the same way the very next day. The words they just kept on coming through. Hard to conceive if you believe me. This is what you really want to do. You got to tune into your inner being. Now let it be. You got to activate your inner vision. excuse yourself and pick up the call.
Pick up the call.
You gotta pick up the call.
Pick up the call.
My friends, you want to keep it complicated. It's really all quite simple in the end. You got to tune into your inner being. Now let it be. You got to activate your inner vision. Now let it see. Cast out the doubt when the mind is chatter. Now let it go. It's time to tap into the heart of the matter. 'Cause don't you know, there's just one cure in a world gone wrong. We all need loving, and if the cure for one is the cure for us all, step right up and don't be shy. Got to look yourself right in the eye. There's a magic moment trying to meet you, an urgent message trying to reach you. The phone is ringing off the wall. So pick up the call. You gotta pick up the call.